Welcome to Talk Data to Me with myself, Craig Stewart from Dalebrook Media. It's been a little bit of a break since the last episode that I recorded. We've been really busy with Data Fest, ton of other events, and joining me from AECOM in Romania is Cristina Duta, who also goes to a lot of events, probably more events than I do, and I'm in the events industry. Very accomplished speaker, was due to be out here in South Africa last year, presented virtually, but very exciting to say that Cristina is going to be coming out to South Africa for Data Fest in November in Cape Town. Cristina, how are you doing? We can't wait to see you in person.
I'm very good. Thank you for the invitation, Craig. And I'm also looking forward to the event because I think this year is going to be even bigger than last year. So it's maybe a missed opportunity that I didn't come last year, but I think it's a greater opportunity for me this year. So
yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Cristina, so this series that I've been doing is really, I guess, around generative AI, but not sort of necessarily only generative AI. It's really about everything that comes before getting into generative AI and all the sort of, I guess, the fundamentals, et cetera, that you need within the business to get to that point. I've had some really good conversations with some South African leaders, some people from Dubai, all kind of, I guess, bringing their different view on what's needed. But I think there's so many common themes, and I'm not going to go into those because it almost seems like I'll be leading the conversation. So I'm going to let you answer those. But maybe before we start, I mean, a few people that attended Data Fest last year would have met you virtually and then sort of obviously at the GenAI event that we've done as well. But as our community grows, maybe you can just give a little bit of an introduction into who you are, your role, and obviously all the work that you do within the AI space at AECOM.
sure. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of actually meeting, I'm Cristina. I'm Director of Intelligent Automation for AECOM, and I'm part of actually Global Business Services in AECOM. So our COE is working in delivering intelligent automation solutions to be able to streamline our back office operations. So my main focus is in making sure we're having a global digital transformation when it comes to this area, and as well as interacting and putting in place the technology and integration between the different systems that we're actually leveraging. As an overall background, I do have more than 12 years in the industry, and I had the pleasure of working across various industries. So I worked in telecom, manufacturing, banking, life sciences. So I loved the opportunity of having to deal with a lot of challenges from different industries because it gives you a broader vision and perspective of what actually can you put in as a best practice. And as I mentioned before, right now, the goal is for us to focus on transforming our global business services. And this is what I'm doing with AECOM currently.
All right, perfect. I look forward to digging into that a little bit later. I know that in South Africa, the GBS environment is very strong and growing quite significantly as well. I think South Africa has got a lot of really big companies that require GBS shared services, I guess, in another term for some people that maybe work in that space. And obviously a really big outsourcing type environment here as well. So I think this will be interesting to those people who work in that space and I guess want to understand how generative AI or AI in general sort of improves productivity, efficiencies, all those sorts of things as well. All right, let's talk first. As I mentioned at the top of the call, data fundamentals, probably the most important part of any AI project, Gen AI, just to make sure that you've got everything in place to make sure that it actually delivers accurate results, actions, insights, etc. Maybe talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are on data fundamentals in AI. I mean, obviously it's important, but let's get your perspective on that.
I'm going to place myself in the position of a business user, right? Because it's very important to understand a little bit that we do make a segregation between the users and the people that are actually producing the data. So we're talking about data consumers and data producers, and it's very important to always look at it at the data foundation from this perspective as well. So I believe that the most important part is actually data quality, and that's key. And we're not talking only about high quality data. We talk about cleaning the data. We talk about well-governed data. These are essential when we decide to onboard on a journey. Either we're talking about simply AI or generative AI. So it truly depends. But while we realize that right now, companies have done a lot in the space of actually gathering the data and being able to pick the data, The problem that still remains is related to data cleansing. How do we ensure the cleaning of the data? So I think there is a two-part journey whenever you decide to onboard, because you need to clean your current data, because you have the current data that's, let's say, siloed across various systems. But at the same time, you need to design a new way of working with the data that you're going to pick up. So it's a first correct right data as the moment you are actually getting it from the start. So people usually tend to leave the second part aside and apply the same as the current data that you have. But I do believe it's about designing a new way of actually collecting the data and looking at the life cycle of data. And it's also about ensuring that you're putting in place correct management. As I mentioned before, you have different stakeholders and different people involved when we talk about data fundamentals. We talk about the data providers, like the source system owners. We talk about the data consumers, like the business process owners. So it's a combination of all of this, and then it comes to IT operations, because you also need the fundamentals in terms of what do you need to actually have it in place, right? So the data lakes, the cloud platforms, and everything else. So it's very important to set that in place when it comes to a data foundation.
All right, perfect. So one of the questions I've been asking around this, so I've been through our events and the community conversations we have sort of really focused on the importance of data quality, data governance, data management, etc. Almost for the last 10 years. And for me, it seems like it's a problem that never really gets fixed. I guess it can never be 100% solved. And you speak at a lot of conferences. You obviously interact with a lot of other data AI professionals. Do you feel that generative AI, this drive to putting that into the business, simple AI as well, as you say, do you think it's something that is really driving a stronger focus on the data fundamentals now, quality, management, governance, etc.? Because it always seems like it needs something to really provide a motivation to focus on these things. Have you found that from the conversations that you're having, or sort of in your own organization, that there's a renewed focus on data fundamentals because generative AI is so powerful and obviously needs good data?
Across the industries, if I were to look at it, I think it has two perspectives. One is the one that you just mentioned, Craig, the fact that it does have a higher motivation in putting a data management strategy in place and being able to do the data fundamentals before you apply Gen AI or AI. But the second part is the other, where people are just patching with what they have just for the sake of having the new shiny object. So people are not necessarily interested in fixing the problems that they have or the challenges that they have related to the data, but showcasing, okay, we have a new technology that we can use and that's it, without necessarily looking at the foundation. So you have these two approaches because it's the fear of missing out, right? A lot of companies are embedding it. And if realistically we're thinking about big organizations, cleaning your data is not very simplistic, right? So it's going to take you a long time. And then what happens? Because the technology evolves constantly, right? We're seeing every day something, a new model coming in. So I think you have these two approaches, people just trying to paste it in somewhere within the organization without considering the data fundamentals, and people who are taking, let's say, a step back before going forward and saying, okay, let's clean the data and we'll see afterwards how it actually is going to provide value to us.
I wish we were sort of in person at DataFest now, because it would be nice to get people to raise hands to say who's in the first camp that is kind of focused on the data quality to get to really good Gen AI, and who's in the second camp that has kind of been forced on them to get the shiny new toy without kind of considering. But we'll save that for November, because that'll be a real interesting poll that we can do with the audience.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think one of the things that we went through in our prep call for this is asking the question, why do you want to do it? And I think that kind of leads into what you were just saying around just having the shiny new toy. As you say, it's the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Everybody else has got Gen AI or AI within their organizations. So therefore, we must do it as well. But there's no real use case, business case, real reason for getting it done. How do you address that question? How should you answer that question to get to that next phase?
It's very difficult to answer it realistically, because how can you stop a storm that's already happening when we are all in it, right? So you cannot necessarily see in front of you what's coming if you're not part of that journey. So I think what's very important for people is to understand that leaders need to be educated on technology that keeps on coming up. Either we're talking about GenAI now, either we're talking about something else in 6 months. It's very important for them to understand how to balance the investments they're doing, right? I do agree, and it's very important to experiment and innovate and create these parts, and that's the goal of having innovation within an organization. But at the same time, you cannot do that let's say, putting aside everything you've built throughout the last 10 years, throwing it away and trying somehow to find a problem that GenAI can solve. Because realistically, people are trying to create problems that GenAI can solve, not the other way around, defining their problem statements and see if GenAI is actually the solution for it. So most probably it's about defining the strategy at organization level and figuring out what are the key problems that the leadership is trying to solve, and see if GenAI is a fit for solving those problems. If not, don't go for it, because it's an investment that you won't be able to prove throughout the time.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a valuable point. And I think even with AI, it's always been, I guess the warning has been, don't do AI for AI's sake. It doesn't need to be in every process, every business unit, every department, etc. Because it's obviously very expensive. It's a big investment. Obviously, there's a lot of change management, etc., that comes with it. And I guess the risk as well is if you just put it in for the sake of putting it in and it doesn't deliver results, it kind of taints the whole Gen AI experience, because people go, well, why did we even do that? It was pointless. And then they paint, AI with the same brush across everything. And then you kind of lost that momentum within the organization. So maybe just very quickly, maybe you can sort of, I guess, blend in some of your use cases there. How could people know that are still very early? What should they look at to decide whether or not Gen AI is a good fit for a problem that they've got?
The way we approach it, and maybe I can take GBS as an example, right? Because Global Business Services is a hub of innovation. We do all back office operations. So we think about order to cash, record to analyze, we think about HR. So we have a pool of multiple streams that are actually a part of a very diverse, let's say, entity. So with that, you have a lot of opportunity if we were to consider it like that. But in the end, it still comes down to what are your strategic objectives. If your goal is to improve customer experience or user experience, okay, what are the KPIs you're tracking on that and looking at those areas? For instance, think about the fact that we have customer centers across the world. We are talking about HR customer centers. We're talking about supplier customer centers. It truly depends what kind of contact centers you are going to put in place. There are a lot of challenges there. Realistically, everybody has faced them throughout the time. Either we're talking about just a chatbot that sits in front and doesn't understand the request, is going to provide you some links. You're going to get frustrated because it's not answering your question. So one of the, let's say, quick wins that people are picking up on when it comes to GBS is looking at contact centers and seeing how you can add GenAI for these kind of, let's say, use cases. So looking at simple questions from HR, simple questions from supplier onboarding, simple questions for billing cycles, where is my invoice, what's happening to it, in which stage it is, and so on and so forth. So being able to improve your user experience with the employees, so the people that are actually doing the process, but also outside with the customers that are reaching out, is the first area, because that's a problem, that's a challenge, right, that we're facing. So it still starts from the problem statement. But it's not only like that, because in the end, GBS is about efficiency, right? So the goal for us is to make sure that we're streamlining the processes, and that's cost reduction. In simple words, our ROI, it's related to that. Yeah. So you're also going to focus on what are the areas that can increase productivity. Where is your team spending the most time? Is it spending it in collecting documents? So is there a way of us collecting and summarizing those documents faster so they can get into an enterprise system? And a perfect example would be when you onboard a new supplier, to be able to read all of the documents of the new supplier, no matter what it is, and being able to actually pull that data afterwards with an automation into your systems. And it also comes to the use cases, for instance, when you do a lot of documentation for, let's say, contracts, right? Commercial spaces. You need to create a lot of them. You need to have them very specific. And realistically, you usually have a small group of people that have that knowledge. So it's about creating a knowledge management type of database using GenAI, combined with the idea of auto generation of some drafts. So people are looking into that because throughout the time, GBS has transformed, and you usually transition processes and so on. So the knowledge management place is critical in that. So being able to have GenAI and being able to build the knowledge management side with it, I think it's a win for everyone, win from GBS, but also for their stakeholders. So these are the areas that come to my mind when we talk about GBS and the way we actually apply GenAI. But again, it comes to defining your problem statement. If for you it's not important and you have a strong knowledge management, don't invest in it.
Yeah. Okay, so you've talked a lot there. Obviously, the GBS case study obviously makes a lot of sense. I love the sort of natural language processing around asking questions, where's the invoice, or, in terms of maybe employment contracts from an HR perspective. And I guess it's quite a nice way, as you say, it's sort of the center of excellence sits there. It's quite a nice way to get it into the business, right? Because you touch so many different parts of the business that it's not necessarily, it has to be in HR. It kind of sits within the GBS environment, but HR is a consumer of GenAI, and it's almost, I guess, to a degree, a low risk or low effort way of getting it in to a degree, rather than each business unit trying to do their own sort of GenAI implementation.
But there is a race, right? Across all of the organizations, everybody wants to have and own the GenAI. So if you look across every market right now, people are discussing about who owns GenAI, who owns everything that's going to be put in place at an enterprise level when it comes to GenAI. Is it IT? Is it an automation center of excellence? Is it the CIO? Is it the CDO, right? So there is this battle of, let's say, who owns it, that it's not yet defined, because people still don't understand that it's not about a full ownership. There are so many shared responsibilities when it comes to AI that realistically only one person being the owner of it would not work. So you would need to have that board of advisors that includes everything from data to information to the innovation itself and IT that would be able to decide commonly together. But it is very interesting to see that type of conversation happening more and more often, because it also comes to who receives the money for the investment.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess then who owns the cost of it as well?
Exactly.
Because everybody wants to own the nice shiny bit, but not necessarily the risk and cost of having it in as well. Cristina, one of the things that we talked about in the prep call was what to know before you start. And I think you've just started to answer some of that question around the stakeholders, and kind of defining who the stakeholders are with regards to generative AI in the organization. You've kind of, to a degree, I guess, answered that there's multiple stakeholders. It's not just one person that owns it and then kind of puts it out. How would you suggest companies go and kind of define who the stakeholders are for Gen AI? And I guess it's very, business dependent. It's probably not one answer that can go across everything, but maybe just in your experience, what are some of the key things people should look for in terms of defining the stakeholders?
Most probably, it all starts with IT. So realistically, IT is one of the main stakeholders that would have a seat at the table whenever we talk about forming an AI journey. It also comes to data, because we just mentioned, right? Data is becoming and having a higher focus than it used to previously have. So you would need data stakeholders at the table together with you. But in the end, if we think about our business processes and everything else, the people that sit in the business are the ones that have the process knowledge. They are the ones that understand their key problems and challenges when it comes to meeting the objectives of the organization. So you would need to make sure you have a representative from the business area that would be able to be knowledgeable in the area, or educated if it's not knowledgeable in the area, so they can actually leverage, and you leverage the process knowledge as well. So I do believe there is as I mentioned before, a group of people that are key in making this possible, together with the other people that we should not, let's say, put aside because we don't like them: risk, security, compliance, and audit, because they have a seat at the table and they have a very straightforward, let's say, plan in actually protecting the company when it comes to risk, and also being able to mitigate any type of risk that is coming. So while we don't necessarily like them because we feel like they're slowing down innovation, that's not necessarily realistic. They have, let's say, the best interest of this working out, but in a regulated and secure environment that would not cause a major harm. Because think about the global outage that just happened 2 days ago with CrowdStrike, right? So everybody was like, yeah. So it's about having also them, because we don't want to forget about these areas. And one other thing that I would probably add, because I don't see it very often, but I do believe it's beneficial, you need to have HR involved as well. They should be one of your key stakeholders, because you're redefining processes, re-engineering processes. You're not picking up an existing process and say, okay, I'm speeding this up. No, you're completely changing that process flow, and HR needs to, let's say, reskill people, re-educate people, create new career paths for them, and being able to actually be part of this journey with you. Because otherwise we're going to lead at a place where you have zero adoption of the solutions you're actually putting in place, because you didn't have a proper HR management part that had a saying in that. So it's also good to have HR at the table whenever you decide to go ahead as one of the key stakeholders.
Yeah, oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wrote down as you were saying that AI literacy, and I think that's obviously something that's going to become super critical to businesses. We've talked about data literacy for a long time. We've talked about the convergence of data literacy and business literacy, i.e., data understanding the business side of things. So AI literacy is going to become pretty essential, across the business, even if it is just, I say even just, I mean, it's not a unimportant thing, but even if it's just around prompt engineering and making sure that people can actually ask the right questions of the GenAI, the LLM, etc., so that they get the answers that they're looking for. Otherwise, they're going to be like, it's just too hard. So is that kind of what you're talking about there, sort of that training across the business?
Yes, this is what I'm referring to. And it's very important that you also mentioned about prompt engineering, because people that won't get it from the beginning or are not educated, they're going to have the flight, let's say flight type of thing. They are not going to use it anymore, right? So they're saying this is too complicated. So you always need to have a support group for people to actually embrace this kind of technologies. And realistically, I do believe in 1 year it's going to be like a mandatory course, just like we do it on ethics, compliance, code of conduct, and all of it. So it's going to be embedded into the business overall, just like the other courses, because otherwise it's not going to work, right? Because nobody will find the time. So you need to repurpose the time of people to educate them in this area. Otherwise, it's just going to be secondary on their list of priorities, because they do have their daily jobs, right?
Perfect. All right, good stuff. Cristina, we've come to the end of our time. I think we could talk about this for a lot longer, but thankfully you'll be out in Cape Town at the end of this year. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Always good to chat to you, and I really look forward to seeing you in Cape Town later in the year.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure.